when your position is in the hands of somebody else, it can end on a moment's notice. And that security that you feel is not necessarily reality. And I got very comfortable in that imagined security. And when it ended, it forced me to confront, okay, that wasn't real. Embrace a bit of discomfort that you choose instead of the discomfort that you don't choose. And so now it's kind of that daily thing of, okay, these are the things that I don't want to do, but they need to get done anyways. Do them. I don't feel ready. Do it anyways. The product isn't perfect. Launch anyways. The email list isn't big enough. Send the email anyways. You can't steer a ship that isn't moving.
Hey everyone, welcome to the podcast. Cleve is our guest today. He is the founder and CEO of MannKitchen, the maker of the pepper cannon, which raised over $3 million on Kickstarter and Indiegogo. Cleve grew up on the island in Alaska, and the mountains was his backyard, and the Pacific Ocean was just outside his front door. He is a cook, nature lover, and now the founder and CEO of MannKitchen. Welcome to the podcast, Cleve.
Hey, Kevin, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. So let's start with your trip to Cambodia. So when we were coordinating the time for this interview, you're like, oh, I'm going to Cambodia for a pepper trip. What do you do on a pepper trip? It's the first time I've heard of that, so educate me.
Yeah, well, it's the first time for me too. And I guess the story starts maybe 3 years ago with the pepper cannon. When I was first testing the prototypes, I was paying attention to how much pepper I was using, and I used about 3 to 4 times as much per month as I used using a standard mill, just because it's, the main deal is the output is so much faster. And I thought, well, if I'm going to be selling a premium pepper mill and people are going to be going through a lot of pepper with it, I may as well be selling premium peppercorns. So then I set off on a search to find, what are the best peppercorns to use? And it was actually a backer of the Kickstarter that reached out and said, hey, I know a family that runs a pepper farm in Cambodia. They import Kampot pepper, mostly France and Western Europe. Would you be interested in an introduction? I said, of course. And one thing led to another. And now I'm a direct importer of pepper from Cambodia. Have been for about 1.5 years. And I meant to get over there last spring during the harvest, but I couldn't because of COVID. So now this year I head off on Monday. So in 3 days. So yeah, I'll get to visit the place where the pepper for MannKitchen pepper has come from.
That's incredible. Sounds like an experience of a lifetime, but also sounds like you'll be going there on a regular basis as well, which makes me a tad envious.
Yeah. Hopefully it'll become a regular thing. We'll see. It's I looked at the weather there. It was 94 yesterday, and it's not even yet to the hot season. So this Alaska guy may have to, I don't know, wear an ice necklace or something to survive, but we'll make it work.
The MannKitchen story. How did that start, and what led up to the mega success that was the pepper cannon?
Oh, great question. So MannKitchen, I guess it started when I was a little kid. Before I had the name or anything like that. I loved cooking. I was always in the kitchen. I wasn't a picky eater, but my mom used to make oatmeal all the time. And when I got to 8, I just said, Mama, I'm not eating oatmeal anymore. I refuse to eat it. She goes, you can have whatever you want. You'll just have to make it yourself. And then, like any good mother, she showed me how to light the stove and gave me access to her well-loved cast iron skillets and spice rack and taught me some basic things. And from there on, I was kind of on a culinary journey. I cooked on fishing boats after that. I cooked in restaurants, and I always enjoyed it. I'm still the primary cook in my home now. I'm married and have 2 kids, and all of us cook. And then I worked so I had that background in cooking and always enjoyed it. And then I got into e-commerce, right? In college and after college, I took a job in e-commerce and was in e-commerce management and worked selling things online for, it started in 2021. I built my first e-commerce website in 2000. And I worked for this small jewelry company in Alaska for a number of years running their web business. And the owner passed away unexpectedly I think that was 2016 or 2015, and the business declined. It ended with me basically losing my job with that company. It was a sad thing because we'd been together so long, but we left on very good terms. But I was out of a job. I was looking for something to do. And initially my reaction was panic. I wish I could say, hey, I had this idea in my back pocket and I hit the ground running and it was all a success immediately. And that was not the case. I probably should have started MannKitchen a lot sooner than I did, but like many people, I got comfortable with the familiar. And when you're comfortable, it's really hard to make a change. At least it is for me. That's been my experience. And then I had to make a change. I had a mortgage to pay, I had family to feed, and the end of my paychecks was right on the horizon. So I got into a bit of panic mode, to be quite honest. I sent out probably my resume over 100 times. I was doing interviews, looking for a job, trying to find a way to pay my bills. And my wife said, you've had this thing that you've been thinking about for a long time. I'd already purchased a domain, MannKitchen, years before, but hadn't done anything with it. And she goes, start your business. You'll be successful. And I get emotional thinking about it because at that time she had more faith in me than I had in myself. And I had a job interview shortly after that. And one of the questions was, what would you do tomorrow if you could do anything? And it took me a long time to answer. And that was very telling. I had been so separated from what I was passionate about for a very long time that it took a minute. But then, those words from my wife, that kind of gave me the courage to take a risk. And that day I stopped sending out my resume and I started working full time, sometimes 10, 15 hours a day on MannKitchen. And it was 3 months before my first sale on MannKitchen. After I built the site, I had product sourced. My very first product was a very simple thing. It was the best spatula for cast iron. Still probably by numbers, my top selling SKU. Cast iron then was having a moment and still is, but long answer, that was kind of the beginning of MannKitchen. And that first year was a real scratch. It was, living hand to mouth. Basically, we were racking up credit card debt, and it was not a seamless, flawless transition from employed to self-employed. There were some stressful months in there, but, yeah, we made it work.
And I can only imagine, especially having 2 kids and a family and a mortgage, what that stress could have looked like at the time. And so what would be your advice to yourself back then when you were feeling a little comfortable, you were still job hunting? Imagine if your wife didn't, give you that nudge then. What would your advice be to yourself?
Wow. Good question. I mean, find her and get married. If she wasn't in the picture then, that's having somebody who believes in you. There's really no substitute for that. So I guess probably if I were giving advice to myself, it would be to, even if you're comfortable, especially if you're very comfortable, get used to and cultivate purposeful discomfort, because discomfort is going to come, right? And it can be the discomfort you choose or the discomfort you don't choose. And choosing it is probably better than the alternative.
That's awesome. Actually, just did an interview with Alex Lieberman, who's the founder of Morning Brew and now a Launch Room client, launching his first physical product with us. And that's something that he brought up as well, Cleve, which was he puts himself in uncomfortable situations to get himself to be more comfortable with his obsessions. So he has very specific tendencies to want things to be perfect. And so he would purposely put himself in unperfect situations and just make himself deal with it. It's almost like, not to put words in his mouth, but like it's almost like training our monkey minds, right? To get used to that uncomfortable situation. So I love that. I love that a lot, Cleve. And I feel like so many, here at Launch, when we get to talk with founders and entrepreneurs every day, so many people are in a similar situation that you were in at the time. It's like they have an idea, they have a product, and they're almost waiting for someone to give them permission to do it. And I would say there's really no better way or no better person to give you permission than first yourself, but then two is your customers, right? Get your product out there in front of customers, see as quickly as you can with the most bare minimum viable product possible, and see if they're willing to give you that dollar deposits or give you their email address to opt in. And then I think the momentum starts from there.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and there's nothing like crowdfunding for that. You can, now if you do it the right way with, collecting and building your list beforehand, pre-launch, then you get that insight a little sooner. I didn't use Launchboom for the launch of the Kickstarter. That was self-done. So I wasn't in a position where I had, 30,000 people signed up and, committed to buy. So when I hit go on the Kickstarter, I still had no idea if there was a market for a $200 pepper mill. It was like, I'd actually placed the first order already. I was like, all right, if I can raise just 10 grand and I can finance the other 20 myself or 15 or whatever it was at that time. I've been working on it for 2 years, right? I'd done all the prototypes. I'd gone back and forth. It was going to be more expensive than I hoped, but it was an awesome pepper mill. But I didn't know, people are used to paying 50 or 60 bucks for a pepper mill, not $200. So when I pressed launch on the Kickstarter, it was a big fingers crossed, hold your breath moment, because I did not prepare properly. It would be the good way to say it. Listeners, you don't have to do it that way, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. It's more stressful than it needs to be. But within 10 minutes, I hit that goal, and it was off to the races. So thankfully, there were enough people that were frustrated, as frustrated as I was with existing offerings on the market for how to grind your pepper.
Well, yeah, I would say it's a little bit, it's certainly true, but there's a little bit more context to that, right? Like you did launch another campaign beforehand, so you did have a little bit of a list and you did have some customers that was aware of your cast iron products. And so there was some awareness around your product, and you didn't just throw it on there and hope for the best.
Right.
You knew people were aware of it. You had a couple lists you could send it out to. And but I would say nowadays, if you didn't have those things, and which you did, but if you didn't have those things and you launched on Kickstarter and Indiegogo, you would just get buried amongst on all the other campaigns out there.
Yeah. It wasn't a completely cold launch. That's true. It was my second Kickstarter. And I did have about 3,000 people in my email list that were recent signups. And another thing to mention on this kind of entrepreneurial journey is we're all tempted to think of, hey, here's this lone wolf who did it by himself and was successful. And that was not the case. I was ready to throw up my hands and give up. My wife came in and encouraged me. I didn't have the number of people that I needed to launch it, and people were super generous. J. Kenji Lopez-Alt, who's a guy that I really respect in the food space, I sent one to it. I didn't know his address or anything. I sent it to his restaurant. He was kind enough to share it with his audience. Andrew Ray of Binging with Babish, I sent him one. He was kind enough to share it with his audience. So you have to be willing to put yourself out there and say, hey, I made this. Do you like it or not? What's your feedback? But then it's the generosity of others. So reach out, find the people that you respect in the space that you want to launch in, and start a conversation, because those relationships and the generosity of those people was key in the launch of the Pepper Cannon.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the difference that we see between, more sophisticated entrepreneurs that are more proactive versus, the people that tend to move a little bit slower. It's like the people that are more active and take initiative, they'll get the product out there in front of, potential customers, potential influencers, even before their product is 100% ready a lot of the times, right? Just to get that feedback and inputs, and, who knows what it'll turn into, like in your case. That's awesome.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned 100% ready, right? When we think we're 100% ready, we're probably about 50% ready. So I launched that Kickstarter, and I thought that the product was perfect, but then you have to react to customer feedback, and, you learn over time, and I've probably made, I think, 6 updates now to the pepper cannon since the initial launch. So it's been modified kind of continuously based on user feedback. And that's another thing, is if you feel like you need to get to 100% before you can go, you're never going to go, right? You need to take that step when you have that, what did you call it? MVP, the minimum viable product. And don't wait for perfection, because it never arrives.
MannKitchen Day. Tell us a little bit more about that. What is MannKitchen Day? What were some of the results that you were able to drive? I know, our Scale Boom team was a part of that, and that was a huge celebration here at Launch Boom when that happened. So give the audience a little bit of context into what MannKitchen Day is and what results you were able to drive.
Sure. So I know the year that you're referring to, last year, where we did very good numbers with some emails that the Launch Boom team helped put together. Before that, MannKitchen Day was around 2 years before that. And it was kind of just, they were, the first MannKitchen Day went by with a whimper, right? I didn't have a huge audience. I didn't have the Launch Boom team in place or those partnerships, but I wanted to have a way to honor my mom. First of all, MannKitchen Day is March 25th. That's her birthday. She's the one who got me into cooking and interested in that. She's a fantastic cook herself. I'm the youngest of 3 boys, so we ate like big Norwegian boys in Alaska eat, and she was up to the challenge for sure. So number one, it was based in a real desire to honor my mom, so that she could look at her youngest son, who was the biggest pain in the neck of all of her 3 boys by far, probably because we're the most similar. It'd be like, okay, well, maybe I did something right with this kid. He's at least grateful now that he's in his, I guess, 40s now, 30s at the time. So yeah, MannKitchen Day started to honor my mom, and it became a promotional day, 24-hour sale, where people the MannKitchen products tend to be on purpose kind of top of the market price wise. I'll take a product that I'll find a problem in the kitchen, see if I can find a way to solve it. If I can, make the product as best as I can with we're not thinking about, okay, how can we scrape pennies here on production costs? How can we make it cheaper, this, that, and the other? It's how can we make the very best product to solve the problem and then price it as such. So they are more expensive items, and as a result, a lot of people will see them, they'll see the ads, or they'll hear about them, or they'll try it at a friend's house, and then they'll look it up and be like, oh wow, that's an expensive item. $200 for a pepper mill is quite a bit. They want it, but they're not going to purchase it right away, right? It's outside of the realm of an impulse buy. So MannKitchen Day kind of gives them an opportunity where those will be the biggest discounts of the year, and it'll be across the board, all the products on that day, 24 hours only. And that's what it became. It's like MannKitchen's Prime Day, basically. I looked at Amazon, they created their own holiday. I thought, hey, we can do that, right? In a time of the year that's typically slow and is a meaningful date for myself and is tied to the true MannKitchen story. And that's how it came up. And we sent out that email, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I think it was it, do you have them in front of you? I think it was close to 100K we did on that day with one email.
Yeah, I don't have it in front of me, but the numbers made everyone on the team's jaw drop to the floor.
Yeah, it was fun. And my email strategy is different than most, and I probably have a lot to learn. I'm sure that I do, but I was in e-commerce for a long time and sending out emails for a long time and receiving emails for an even longer time. And we all know, you open your inbox and, I'll have 300 or 400 messages a day, and 3 or 4 of them are ones that I want to read, right? And a lot of them are from retailers, and they're just hoping that they happen to hit you at a time when you're looking for the product. And that's not the strategy that I employ at all. I don't want to fill people's inbox. I don't want to spam. I only want to write an email that I would want to receive. And as a result, I only send out, 6 or 7 emails per year. MannKitchen Day is one. The big promos around Black Friday, Christmas. If there's a product launch, I'm cognizant to not just send out emails. Be like, okay, I send a weekly email or a monthly email or whatever it is. I only want to write an email that I'd like to read. So respect people's inboxes. I've found that leads to higher open rates, better engagement. People aren't actively tuning it out when they see your name in their inbox.
Fantastic. So you had, I think, 17 years of experience in e-commerce. I saw on your LinkedIn, 2 different jobs. One of them was a director of e-commerce. Another one was e-commerce manager prior to starting MannKitchen. Why, with all of that experience in e-commerce, why crowdfunding, Cleve? Like, what made it appealing to you?
Crowdfunding because I was dead broke, right? For the first campaign, at least, there was no money for the first production run. So my first Kickstarter was the MK9 chef knife, and that was just a product that was the result of multiple frustrations that I had with existing knives on the market, and my answer to them, thinking, okay, if these are problems for me, hopefully other people have these same problems, and I can hit that audience. Crowdfunding because I did not have money for that first production run. And it's a fantastic testing ground for newer, kind of more innovative, on the edge products. And so the pepper cannon was another one like that, where at that time I had enough that I could swing about half of the first production run, which is why my initial goal was so low. And you guys have done crowdfunding a lot, right? There's your internal goal and your external goal. There's what you actually need, and then what you'd like to raise. So you start with a low goal so you can hit it on that first day. I didn't know that at my first launch. So I kind of learned that one the hard way with the first launch. Luckily, that one, it did get funded. I think we about doubled our goal, and the product was a success. The pepper cannon there was a bit more footwork that went into the beginning. And crowdfunding was really there for if you have an innovative product. Somebody said, I think it was Ido Sternberg, he was like, these are some of the best customers that you'll have in your life. And he's right. These are early adopters. They're willing to put some money in the game, knowing that a lot of Kickstarters fail to materialize, right? Most of the backers on there, probably all of them, unless it's their first project, have put money out in the hopes that they're going to receive their widget or their product or whatever it is on time, and it ends up dragging out months, years, longer than they anticipated, and sometimes they never receive it. So these are people that are they're first adopters. They're willing to put some money in without a guarantee, and if you do fulfill, even if it's not perfectly on time, if you do fulfill and if you meet or exceed the expectations you've created, they become some of your biggest fans and can really be the engine that pushes your brand forward.
Yeah. And you definitely saw that between your first campaign and your second campaign. So talk a little bit more about like what happened there, Cleve. So your first campaign, I think, raised $50-something thousand, but your second campaign together with In Demand raised $3 million, right? What happened in between?
Yeah, well, launch boom happened in between, experience happened in between, some key influencers, like I mentioned previously, people that are very respected in their spaces that have curated an audience because of the quality and care they put into their content. J. Kenji Lopez, Andrew Ray of Binging with Babish. They were kind enough to share the pepper cannon with their audiences, and I had a page set up that could capture the email addresses so people could come if they went to my Instagram and click the link in my bio. They could sign up to be on the list of people that were notified when the campaign went live. So that list was bigger on the pepper cannon launch, and it, like I mentioned earlier, it did as soon as I hit go. We hit the initial goal in right around 10 minutes. It was between 10 and 11 minutes, and then it just kind of kept going from there. And that was a shock to me. I did not know. I thought, okay, best case scenario, maybe this raises $100,000. That was like pie in the sky. Awesome. I would be very happy with, but it took off and kept going. So the Kickstarter lasted for 30 days, raised over $1 million. Then the day that it ended, we immediately pivoted over to an Indiegogo in-demand campaign, and Launch Boom was the partner for that. So during the Kickstarter, Ido Sternberg at Jellup was my marketing partner. He ran all the ads, driving traffic to the Kickstarter page. When we transitioned to the Indiegogo in-demand, Launch Boom was the partner, and it was the same campaign page basically ported over to Indiegogo. They make it very easy to do. And then my marketing partner, Launch Boom, as you know, you guys did a fantastic job getting great high intent buyers to the page. And I thought, okay, the Kickstarter lasted 30 days. The Indiegogo will probably do the same. I think it was 8 or 9 months. that it ran on Indiegogo. It just kept going and going and going. And I think I did 4 or 5 different production runs because I did, the first order was for 1,000 units, the smallest number that I could possibly do and still get it mass produced, right? And that sold out in a matter of days. So then it was a second order and a third production run and a fourth production run. And each time I was very upfront with the backers on Kickstarter. Kickstarter, I believe, was 3 different orders we sold through, and then transitioned to Indiegogo, and I bumped the order size, and still we sold out, I think, another 3 times. So it just kept on going. It had real legs. Part of that, I think, is a testament to that the pepper can, it was a product that solved a problem that people could relate with, right? If you're a cook and you're in the barbecue world, you've cranked a traditional pepper mill over something and been like, this is taking way too long. That's how it started, right? I started counting cranks on my pepper mill, 70 some cranks for a tri-tip. And that experience had to be something that could be improved. So the pepper cannon did that, and people could relate immediately. They could be like, 10 times faster than traditional mills. That's something that I could use. So it kept going, and it could have still been on Indiegogo today, but the goal was always to get it off crowdfunding and get it onto a direct-to-consumer website. So MannKitchen existed before, MannKitchen.com existed before either of those crowdfunding launches. So we had a place to send people that was ready. I was just waiting until I could catch up with the order volume and actually have stock available in the US, because once you transition to direct-to-consumer, these aren't crowdfunding customers anymore. They don't want to wait 3 months or 4 months or however long it is. They want their product in 3 days, right? We've all been trained by Amazon Prime. You need to have it in stock. I want it now, sooner preferably. So yeah, 8 months on Indiegogo with LaunchBoom helping out, and then on to e-commerce, and LaunchBoom continuing as the partner. So they revamped my website. They stayed on, they helped me out with email marketing, kept that marketing engine running, just instead of pointing it to Indiegogo, pointing it to mannkitchen.com. And the transition was pretty seamless. It just kept on trucking.
Yeah. So for people that haven't heard of Indiegogo in demand before, basically it just allows you to perpetually generate pre-orders while you're catching up on fulfilling the demand, right? And the demands, as you mentioned, far exceeded. I mean, you were aiming for $100,000, ended up doing $3 million in total. So obviously it's going to take and it was COVID too, right? So the supply chain was a little bit bottlenecked. So while your suppliers were catching up with all the orders, you're able to continue generating sales, which is the beauty of Indiegogo in demand.
Yeah, it was fantastic. Finding people that are, they've curated a ready audience for pre-orders, people that are willing to wait to receive their items, and those are not the typical customers. So for product launches, if it's an innovative product, it solves a problem, and you can demonstrate a advantage over existing products, and crowdfunding is the way to go.
Yeah. And then we did a website revamp for MannKitchen, and the sales continued and actually even increased in velocity. You can share as much or as little as you want there, Cleve. But and then we did a pre-order for the salt cannon. At that point, I think it's like, well, why do a pre-order? Why not just order inventory and start shipping and get it to customers in 2 or 3 days? What was the thought, like what happened there in between, and then the end of the pepper, or not the end, but the end of the Indiegogo in demand pepper cannon campaign, and then the launch of the salt cannon?
Yeah, so the salt cannon was a reluctant product launch, right? I didn't want to make a salt mill for all the reasons that you can imagine. Salt is highly corrosive. You mix it with moisture, you mix it with oxygen, which is pretty plentiful in the kitchen environment. You get rust, right? You get corrosion. It's a more difficult product to make. It's a more expensive product to make. Multiple people during the Kickstarter were asking, hey, we want a matching salt cannon to go with the pepper cannon. I said, I don't want to make that product. Here are the reasons why, but I'm a slow learner. If you've got customers clamoring for a product, they may know something that you don't. They certainly did in this case. So I said, all right, if I can't remember what the number, I think it was 300 people. If 300 people sign up, then we'll make the salt cannon to go with the pepper cannon. In a matter of days, that list is filled up. I a very kind backer who was nice enough to put together. I had what did she do? Oh, I had a link for the sign up, but she collated all the names onto a spreadsheet for me so that I could keep track of it. And it was a matter of days or maybe a couple weeks before that filled up. And it was clear that there was demand for the salt cannon. And I thought, all right, well, this will be simple to do. I'll just change out the high carbon stainless steel burrs for ceramic burrs, and we'll hit the ground running, right? Easy fix. It'll probably be cheaper than the pepper cannon to make because ceramic is, and the burrs at least, less expensive to manufacture than those big high carbon stainless burrs. So I did that. I started going back and forth with prototypes. I thought, okay, maybe a month I can launch the salt cannon after the pepper cannon ended. It was significantly longer than that because salt is such a bear to work with. It was clear pretty quickly that I was going to need to make much more extensive changes than I originally thought. But we ended up swapping out virtually all the stainless steel parts for titanium, which is far more expensive than stainless. The burr sets were more expensive than I anticipated. The bearings that go inside the pepper cannon are stainless, but stainless isn't no stain, it's less stain, which over time with salt, even marine grade stainless steel will rust. So the bearings had to be replaced with ceramic bearings. Essentially, it was the exact opposite of what I intended. It was more expensive. It was going to take way longer. But I made a promise to these people, right? And that's what crowdfunding is. You make a promise, and then you hope that you can make good on it and do whatever you can to prepare it so that you're not over-promising and under-delivering. Long story short, we finally got a prototype that functioned well and resisted corrosion well enough to do the product launch. But I still knew that I didn't know how many people would ultimately get it, right? I knew that there was some interest, but I didn't know how many units. So the pre-order works fantastic in that case. You're like, okay, I don't know if I need 500 or 5,000 of these units. Put it up for pre-order and you know immediately, right? I've got a list of people to send it to. I've got the list of people that have supported the pepper cannon and crowdfunding that I can reach out to because I had them. Side note, I used my Shopify store to get the crowdfunding backers to do their final checkout on there because on crowdfunding, you don't own that customer data. It belongs to Kickstarter. It belongs to Indiegogo. Fulfilling it via MannKitchen.com gave me the opportunity to get that user data so that they could have the opportunity to opt into my list as well as select add-on items that were complementary to what they purchased on crowdfunding. So the pre-order was because I didn't know how many. And then once we launched the pre-order, you kind of get a sense of, okay, this is the pent-up demand that there was for the product. And then the pre-orders continue and you get a sense of what the daily is going to be like, what the daily demand is for it. You know, it'll be a little more than the pre-order just because once it's in stock, they sell faster than items that people have to wait for. But that's the reason that we did the pre-order on the salt cannon, as opposed to just, placing an order with a guest product demand and launching that way.
Yeah, huge advantage to understanding what the demand for a product is before making the investment into production and inventory. Because if your demand is significantly higher than you thought, well, it's only incrementally more time for the supplier to produce twice as much or even 3 times as much a lot of the times. Yeah. And so you had mentioned doing the pre-order on your website instead of Kickstarter or Indiegogo because of the data that you're able to collect on your websites. But on Kickstarter and Indiegogo, you still get their email address at the end of the crowdfunding campaign, right? You get a download of a spreadsheet. What was the specific advantage you would have by taking those pre-orders on your website?
So twofold. You do get those emails, but they don't belong to you. You actually have to click a little box that says, after I fulfill my rewards, this email list gets deleted and I never use it again, right? That's Kickstarter's customer data and Indiegogo's customer data. So the primary benefit of running them through Shopify, and I use an app called Crowd Control. It's a fantastic outfit. Jason Fulmer's a great guy. I've worked with him now on 2 campaigns. It basically allows them to create these surveys that go out to Kickstarter backers where they click a link, they go to my Shopify site, it's already got their reward populated in the cart, gives them the option to put add-ons and or not opt into our email list. So primary benefit, getting that customer data so that we can market to them for future product launches, and secondarily, giving people the opportunity to select different rewards without having to pay, that commission to Kickstarter or Indiegogo on those add-ons.
That's awesome. What makes a good day for you, Cleve?
Oh gosh. Well, today I slept in for about an hour and a half. It's a gray day here, so the light didn't come through the curtains like it normally does. So sleeping in. A lot of entrepreneurs are going to tell you that. They say, "Hey, get up and jump in your cold plunge tub and run for 5 miles." Yeah, I probably should be doing that, but I'm not. So,
What time did you wake up today, Cleve?
I got up at 8:50. So, and I start a little bit later here than I do when I'm on the mainland. We split time between Hawaii, where my wife is from, and Washington. And the time here is a little bit better because then I can communicate with China first thing in the morning, but then also in the evening starting at 6 instead of, in the evening starting at 9, which is limiting if you're on West Coast time. Other parts of a good day, there's got to be time with family. There's got to be a shared meal, and there's got to be meaningful customer interactions. So every day MannKitchen is still a team of one, right? I've got subcontractors and agencies that I work with, but the customer interaction, if you've gotten an email if you've typed in the email to info@mannkitchen.com and gotten a reply, that's from me. If you're interacting on Facebook or Instagram, those are me. And I like keeping kind of my finger on that pulse, because the first thing that kind of disappears in a startup story is that the founder kind of excuses himself from the day-to-day customer interactions. And I want to be on those front lines, because that's how you learn, right? If there's a real problem with the product, I hear about it immediately. There's no filter of people that are wanting to telling me what I want to hear. Customers don't tell you what you want to hear. They tell you what the truth. So, meaningful customer interactions, share time with family, and then some sort of activity. I don't know if you've heard of pickleball, but I'm a racquetball player and was for 15 years. Yeah, about that. And on the island here, there's no more racquetball courts. So my wife and I decided to try out pickleball, and man, it's addictive. So 4 or 5 times a week now, pickleball is part of the perfect day.
Beautiful. Yeah, this sounds like some sort of physical exercise, but pickleball makes the physical exercise way more fun than just lifting weights or running. Awesome. What is a common mistake that you see people make, Cleve?
That's a very good question. For me, it was getting comfortable being comfortable. I was in that position as an e-commerce manager for quite a few years, and I had the skill set necessary to go out on my own, but didn't take that leap because I preferred to be comfortable, have those things that I felt were predictable and constant and reliable. But the reality is when your position is in the hands of somebody else, it can end on a moment's notice. And that security that you feel is not necessarily reality. And I got very comfortable in that imagined security. And when it ended, it forced me to confront, okay, that wasn't real. Embrace a bit of discomfort that you choose instead of the discomfort that you don't choose. And so now it's kind of that daily thing of, okay, these are the things that I don't want to do, but they need to get done anyways. Do them. I don't feel ready. Do it anyways. The product isn't perfect. Launch anyways. The email list isn't big enough. Send the email anyways. You can't steer a ship that isn't moving, right? So get a little momentum, even if it's not perfect, and even if it's uncomfortable. That's to answer the question, to get back to it. You asked the mistake. The mistake is getting comfortable in comfort. So cultivating meaningful discomfort is how to avoid the mistake.
What is a story of a mistake or horrible failure that ultimately shaped you? You talked about one of them, which is, the getting comfortable in your position in e-commerce. But what is something that's ultimately shaped you positively down the line, in hindsight, seeing the silver linings?
Yeah. Well, even on the successful Kickstarter campaign and Indiegogo campaign, I made multiple mistakes. Well, I sent out an email to the entire list of backers that sent them to a broken link. So they all underpaid for shipping and ended up having to pay additional, which nobody likes to get. The lesson in that I learned was be upfront and honest with your mistakes. People are going to forgive you if they see that you're human and you're willing to own it, as opposed to try and deflect and say, "Oh, this wasn't our mistake. This was something else." No, own your mistakes. That was one that I've learned over and over again in life and e-commerce in particular. That if you own it, you get a little bit of grace from people. They understand you're human. And there was probably 6 or 7 things like that throughout the order gathering and fulfillment process where I, with the best of my knowledge, communicated openly. That ended up not being the case. There were things that shift as you go along, and being open and owning it makes a big difference.
So you mentioned earlier sleeping in a little bit, pickleball, right? Movement in your body. What else do you do on a regular basis that upgrades your mind, body, and emotional well-being?
Good question. Apart from the physical activity, getting out in nature makes a big difference. I'm not a video game guy, but every day I play Sudoku and Solitaire. Those are my video games, right, on the phone. So that I can keep track of. Okay, what are my times for completion? What's my complete rate on my Solitaire? So do I know that those things make any difference at all? I don't. But before that, it was Tetris, and something that is a baseline, so you can tell if you're slipping a little bit. I guess I'd recommend those.
Yeah, there's actually a common theme across several people that I've spoken with, and both online, recorded, and offline, which is like just something small every day that challenges you a little bit to see, keeps you a little humble, right? And that is measurable for yourself as well. An example of that is actually our CEO, Mark. He's learning Spanish, spent a few years learning Spanish, but, and took the leap to move to Colombia, Medellin, to further improve Spanish. But sometimes he still people say something a little faster, and he's like, what'd you say? And still feel like something that gives you a bit of a challenge and a beginner's mind.
Super important. And that gets back to the voluntary discomfort, right? You're volunteering for something that feels difficult because it's change, and super valuable to incorporate that into your everyday.
What is one book, or it doesn't have to be a book, it could be a YouTube video, a Netflix series, a movie documentary that has given you some sort of insights and helped you shape your perspective and beliefs?
Got it. So I wouldn't say a book. I would say an email list. Every day for I don't know how many years now, Seth Godin has written an email, and he sends it out every day without fail, 365 days a year. And every single time it's worth reading. He's a marketer and entrepreneur and just a fantastic mind that has been very generous with his knowledge. And I would say if you're going to do one thing, subscribe to Seth Godin and read his emails every day. I've been doing that for 8 to 10 years. And if you implement 1% of what you learn from him, you're going to be better off than you were before.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Seth as well. Purple Cow is one of his books that I highly recommend to anyone launching a new product or business. It's about exactly what it sounds like, how to stand out amongst the black and white cows. What is one piece of advice you would leave for the listeners?
Find a way to volunteer for discomfort and launch before you're fully ready.
Awesome. Well, really appreciate your time today, Cleve. Thank you so much for being so generous with your time, your knowledge, your expertise, and your experience so far. The success that you've had at MannKitchen has been incredible. and it's just the beginning, right? You've only been doing this for a handful of years. So I'm really excited to see where you're going to take this thing. Are there any asks that you have of the listeners?
No asks, but yeah, if you're interested in reaching out, I'm on LinkedIn, Cleve Oines at LinkedIn, MannKitchen on Instagram, MANN Kitchen, and then mannkitchen.com. There's a blog on there, recipes. Find a way to interact and share a meal with your family and have fun.
Thank you again, Cleve. Really appreciate having you on, and looking forward to our next one together.
Thanks, Kevin. I appreciate it.